For our first full day in Ireland, we had quite the itinerary scheduled for us. We got onto the bus and headed to the very north part of Ireland, just along the coast. There is a castle perched on top of a cliff called Dunluce Castle. And this castle was actually the inspiration for the Greyjoy castle in Game of Thrones. So we were pretty excited to see this, and the scenery could not have been better. Dunluce Castle is described as one of the most picturesque and romantic castles in Ireland. The castle was originally built in the 1500s, but quite a lot has gone on here. It has changed hands and has seen quite a bit of fighting over those years. In 1639, the back section of the castle fell from the cliff and tumbled down into the sea. And the castle today is very much a ruin of what it once was, but you can imagine how grand this used to be back when people lived here and the structure was intact. There are several places around the castle that they are doing some repair work to try to preserve what remains of the structure.
We took him down to the river, he walked in, and he looked like the salmon.
The castle is positioned out on the cliff on the other side of this deep valley. So you have to go over a bridge to get to the structure itself, which must have been a great asset when they were trying to defend this location.
How you doing, sir? You're not cold.
Oh, no, right.
You get to the other side, that's the difference. You get to my age, you have about 4 layers on in the morning.
For now.
Our guide told us about the history of this castle, including a story about a woman who used to live here, and she was killed when she tried to get into a boat to run away and get married, and she is said to be the ghost that can be found in the castle. We marveled at how rough the ocean was and how green the tops of the cliffs were. We had come to Ireland prepared for rain, and I felt so lucky that once again we actually had sunshine. It was cold and damp, especially here along the ocean side, but it was a beautiful day for this time of year, so we really got to enjoy walking around the castle. And it was amazing to be in this place. It is almost exactly what I would have pictured, but more beautiful.
These massive walls. If you look at the modern day television and you have Game of Thrones, this was one of the Game of Thrones sites. There's 26 in Northern Ireland, this is one of them. For anybody who's a fan, this is the home of the castle of the Greyjoys. You have a bit of an imagination with all the trick photography.
Filming this trip came with some new challenges. This was our first bigger group trip, and I really try not to film other people too much if I can help it. The other challenge was the light and shadow. Because the sun was out, I was getting these very strong light and shadow, and that made it challenging to actually get good footage sometimes. We continued around to see some of the other rooms in the castle and trying to imagine this when there was a roof and when there was furniture and life was going on inside of these walls. We came back out through the main entrance with this famous facade out to the bridge that brings you across to the other side. As the tour ended, our guide mentioned something about going to the parking lot to have a toast with some whiskey. And I thought he was joking at first because I think it was about 10:30 or 11 in the morning at this point, but he was not joking. Next thing I knew, we were in the parking lot and everybody was getting a shot of whiskey. After our morning shot of whiskey at a castle in Ireland, we got back onto the bus and we were headed to our second stop of the day. So we were going to the Giants Causeway, and this was about 15 minutes away, and to get there we were just driving along this incredible coastline of Northern Ireland. Now, I was thrilled that the sun was out and this was a great day for exploring the Giants Causeway, but it made filming a little bit challenging. Like I said, the sun creates a glare on the glass, so this was quite a difficult trip to film. Hopefully you can still enjoy the scenery from the Irish countryside, even with that little bit of glare. But the great thing is that since we were on the bus, both Patrick and myself got to enjoy these views the entire time. We didn't have to worry about navigating or getting lost or driving or any of that stuff. So that was making this whole process of seeing Ireland really relaxing and enjoyable. We got pretty bundled up as we headed to the Giants Causeway because this is a pretty exposed area of coastline. It's so nice that the sun is out, but it's still pretty chilly. From the parking area, we walked over to the visitor center, and this is where we got to learn more about how unique this geological feature is. The columns that make up the Giants Causeway are basalt, and they were formed in this extremely unique shape by the volcanic activity that was going on here. And the columns are flat on the sides. They can have 5, 6, 7, or sometimes even 8 sides. And they're flat on the top, which makes them almost like little stepping stones that you can climb around on. But when you are walking around on them, you have to be very careful because they're quite slippery. They're always wet. The columns go right into the sea, and there are waves crashing over the top of them. So you have to be quite careful with your footing and make sure that you wear good footwear. While we were in the visitor center, we also learned about the mythology that surrounds this area, the story of why this particular area was created. We picked up our audio guides and then opted to walk down. You can also get a shuttle if you prefer not to walk. I've seen many pictures of the rocks themselves, but the walk down to get to the area where the famous rocks are is almost as amazing. The cliff sides and the rocks in the ocean, this was such a nice walk. I just kept looking around and taking pictures. The colors were amazing because the sun was out. So the walk of just getting there was just as enjoyable as climbing around on these famous rocks. As we walked around, we listened to the audio guide, which told us all sorts of information about what happened in this area. And we got to learn the story of how this area became called the Giants Causeway. And the myth goes that there was a giant that lived in Scotland and a giant that lived in Ireland. And they were going to meet to fight each other. So the causeway was created so that they could have this fight. But the Irish giant knew that the Scottish giant was bigger. So he devised a plan to have his wife tuck him into a crib and cover him with a blanket, When the Scottish giant arrived, he saw what he thought was the baby and thought, well, if that's how large the baby is, I don't want to fight the father. So he returned back to Scotland and destroyed the causeway connecting Scotland and Ireland. And that is how the Giants Causeway got its name. We spent some time very carefully walking around on the rocks. You have to be extra mindful of where you're putting your feet and making sure that you have your balance, because the rocks are very wet and slippery and you do not want to fall on these. They actually have someone who stays here and they're like a little bit of a lifeguard. They keep an eye on everybody and make sure that you are safe while you're trying to get that Instagram-worthy photo. Although we did not climb out onto the highest area of the rocks because it just looked too precarious and the waves were really large. There have been people who have slipped in and it didn't go well. So we were staying safely on this area and it was still absolutely amazing. I could have climbed around on these rocks all day. Sometimes when you see pictures of things or videos of places that you're going to visit, and then you actually get there, it doesn't always live up to the expectations. But that was not the case at all with Giants Causeway. I feel like this vastly exceeded my expectations. I've seen pictures of the stones and I thought how neat to be able to walk around on them on the ocean side, but actually being there and seeing the entire area, the cliffs, the green tops, the giant waves, the beautiful sky, the whole experience absolutely exceeded what I expected from seeing the Giants Causeway. When you get to the end of the basalt columns, you can see they just go down into the ocean and disappear. So it really connects you to that mythology, especially because on the other side, on Scotland, there are similar basalt columns. So it really makes you feel connected to that mythology. We slowly and carefully made our way back up toward the parking area. I did not feel like I was ready to leave this place yet, but since we were with a group tour, we had to stay on the group schedule. So we took as many pictures as we possibly could to remember this place and then made our way back up toward the top.
Sorry guys.
Sure, welcome back. Back up by the visitor center, we saw that there's actually a bed and breakfast located just next door. This would be an awesome place to stay. There's a hotel if you want to stay here. And if we had more time, we would walk some of these trails. So you can actually go up over to the top there. And even on the sides of the mountain down by the causeway, there's a lot of hiking trails, but we have to be back at the bus in like 15 minutes, so it's kind of the bad side about being on a bus tour. You get to see a lot, but everything, you're kind of moving quick. The network of hiking trails looked so inviting. To walk along the tops of those cliffs must give you an incredible view. but we were heading back to the visitors center and back onto the bus. Now, one of the reasons that we were on such a time crunch is because they wanted to get us back to the city with enough time to explore Derry. And as sad as I was to leave the Giants Causeway, I was really looking forward to walking around and exploring the walled city. There is so much to see there. This is also why this particular day is one of my all-time favorite travel days. From seeing a castle on a cliffside to climbing around on the Giants Causeway and then walking around the walled city of Derry. There was so much experience that we packed into this day, but that's going to be in the next video. So make sure that you are subscribed so you can come along with us.
About you and me, the injustice, the next president to be, the news and what you hear, your career. It's time for you to face those fears, and it's all fair to be aware, and I'll be there, so don't be scared. Just take a deep breath of air, and 1, 2, 3 to 10, you begin to focus again, and though time flies, we have enough to realize this bigger than the both of us.